good evening to those of you who are already on, have been on for a few minutes. Thank you very much. Between our on-site producer, Tricia Pittman, here at Roundtable Recording Studio. We're in downtown Broad Ripple, Indiana, and thrilled to be with you tonight. So my name's Ralph Reiff, and co-host with me tonight, Scott Hudson. And this is Fingerprints on Metals. So why Fingerprints on Metals? Scott and I have spent our careers, which is we've been blessed with a lot of years, and still going at it. And we've been fortunate to, in part of our careers, to help athletes win medals, particularly those medals you think of, Olympic medals. And we've had those opportunities, and that's why we named it what it is. And but the real why is something that I want to get into so we don't lose focus on this. Scott and I, for months, maybe years, have talked about fielding questions from coaches, parents, athletes, agents of athletes, and really fielding questions of all the whys, right? Why this? Why that? How can I do this? Why did this injury occur? And we've spent our careers doing that, and we've found that people don't ever stop asking questions, and that's what makes us good at our job. Is because we want to tackle those questions. But the real why behind this, Scott, is that we decided, well, let's take it to maybe a bigger audience so we can answer questions that really to the value of those who are listening. And I'll talk about the format not only tonight, but going forward. But that's our why, is we want to be an educator. We want this to be an educational platform. We want to talk about everything from emergency action plans for cross-country courses to sweat analysis and sweat content, sore Achilles tendons, and why don't my shoes fit? All of those kinds of things. What's the best recovery that I can do after an endurance event? And our focus is going to our language is going to be primarily around endurance sports, primarily around track and field and cross country. We've been fortunate to play in that world for a number of years with USA Track and Field, and as well as local high schools, local universities, here to central Indiana. And so we've just been fortunate. And so it's easiest for us to think about Fingerprints on Metals around distance events, endurance events, triathlon, swimming, biking, running, distance running, but it all scales. Everything that we talk about, all the history that we have, it really scales to any sport you want to think about, whether that's cross-country skiing, whether it's rock climbing, whatever it might be, stick and ball sports. And it all scales to that because it's the human body. And so biology is pretty similar from person to person. And so all of this is scalable. But I want to introduce Scott Hudson. Some of you who are in this webinar tonight certainly know Scott very well. Some of you have never heard of him until tonight. Same with me. So we want to introduce ourselves, and I'm going to ask Scott to talk about himself, and then I'll fill in the blanks that he may not talk about. So Scott Hudson.
Thank you, Ralph. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you all for joining. As Ralph said, we're very blessed. We've been able to do this at an unbelievable level, but it's not just the Olympic level. It's middle school athletes. It's recreational athletes. It's the weekend warrior. And so I got into this career in athletic training at Indiana and graduated in 91 and followed up with a master's in 93 and grew up in Speedway, 9 blocks from the Indianapolis 500, which is coming up in May.
Yeah.
I'm getting excited. It's a month away. But yes, we're about knowledge and about educating the athlete. And we're going to talk about those topics from foam rolling to mini bands to what you should have in your kit that you take to your meet and I get asked questions. Ralph said we still get asked questions. I bet 9 out of 10 people that use a foam roller don't you do it correctly. So that's the education part that we all bring to this as an athletic trainer. If you're an athletic trainer out there, if you're an athlete helping your fellow athlete, or if you're a coach and you're at a small school and you've learned this and you can pass that on to your athletes.
Yeah. Scott and I have had really a lot of fun along the way. We worked together at St. Vincent Sports Performance here in Indianapolis. And I didn't know Scott before then. Everybody said we ought to hire Scott Hudson. And so one of the better moves that I made, we had an extraordinary staff there, still an extraordinary group of people at Ascension St. Vincent Sports Performance. And we were fortunate enough to be there together, and we did some work with USA Track and Field. We traveled to Marburg, Germany together for the Thorpe Cup.
That was my first. Yeah, you took me on my first international trip, and you went out on a limb and got me to go because you were the only one that was supposed to go,
right?
And taught me about international travel and how to do all those little nuances that happen and what you have to take, because you just can't pick it up at the local drugstore.
Yeah. And that was a memorable. So if you're not familiar with the Thorpe Cup, which I would imagine no one is that's listening to this, unless you're really into the decathlon, heptathlon world, but it's an annual event between Germany and the United States. Started many years ago, and it trades back and forth from year to year where it's held. It's either held in Germany or in the United States. Travis Gepfert, who's the track coach now at Kansas State, doing an extraordinary job there, did an extraordinary job as an assistant at Arkansas. Travis was the head coach, and Travis is a former decathlete himself. And so that was our staff. And but we had a crazy injury history there. We had 2 injuries. We had an ACL tear.
The first event.
In the first event.
Men's hurdles,
Men's
right?
hurdles. Yep. And I was down at the end of the track and saw him come off the second hurdle, and he wobbled and he finished the race. But then we tried to get him through the 2 days with taping and so on and so forth. And then we had another athlete that during warm-up in the pole vault just does what a lot of pole vaulters do. They sort of slide down the pole. Well, he landed in the box and broke his ankle. So Scott left the field with that athlete, and Scott got a taste of German medicine inside that German facility, and so it was a crazy couple of days. And just an extraordinary group of fans who came out for that event. We had men's, women's, and we had one athlete off that group who eventually ended up in the women's Olympic side.
Yep.
And I'm blanking on her name.
Barb Nawaba?
Yes,
is that it?
Barb, right.
Yep.
So we've traveled a lot together, and we did some Diamond League meets through the International Track and Field Federation, and we stayed in Stockholm one time, and the hotel rooms were so small you could reach from side to side.
Side to side.
Yeah. So we've had a lot of experiences, and besides the we don't mean to turn this into a travel log by any means, but they're great memories. So many things. Those of you who are in sport, whether you're coaching it, you participated previously, you're around athletes, you can appreciate all that goes on around the event. So a little bit about me. I'm Ralph Reiff, and so why am I sitting here? I got to tell you that I've been a fan of the Olympic Games for as long as I can remember, and I'm 67. And back on a farm in northern Indiana, I was the youngest of 4. My oldest brother who's 12 years older than me. He was a multi-sport athlete at little old North Webster High School, which feeds into Wawasee High School. And he was a track athlete, among other things. So I got really interested in it, so much so that I took some roofing nails and actually took a pair of gym shoes and pulled the tongue up and was out in our shop on the farm and actually pounded some roofing nails into the front of my shoes, my gym shoes, because I wanted a pair of track shoes,
Track
and
spikes.
so I ran track and field and other sports and so on and so forth, and just always had a passion for it. My brother Mark, 2 years older than myself, spent his whole adult career as a track and field coach. Was very fortunate. Mark was was a second place finisher on the discus in the state of Indiana twice, and both times to Rob Goshert, who was at Fort Wayne Snyder High School, who went on to Butler. And then Mark was at Indiana Central University and was coached by the legendary Gary England. And Gary had an extraordinary history of athletes, particularly in the throws. And Mark was shot put and discus and went on to coach with Sam Bell at Indiana University, then went to Yale, and then went to Long Beach State and finished his career at Stanford for 9 years. And so Mark being in it at a pretty high level really sparked my interest, and I was an athletic trainer, and he would always ask me questions and so forth. And so I just have a real excitement about track and field and cross country and endurance sport, and for that matter, again, scaling it out. I'm such a fan of courageous people who put their toe on the line or their foot in the clips or put the swim cap on or whatever it might be, and just get after it. So we're here because we have a passion, and it's been great for us, and we hope to give you a little bit of that. Before we go too far, we're in track and field season. Yep. And here in Indiana, over this past weekend on Saturday was the indoor track and field relays, the state championships. The Indiana High School Athletic Association does not sponsor indoor track and field. And so the legend, Bob Potter, who was a track coach here in the Lawrence Township schools forever and extraordinary pole vault coach, among other things, has really been the spearhead behind that event. And team champions, they have two classes, large and small. The small boys champion was Bishop Chatard High School, followed by Westview from up in northern Indiana. On the girls' side, Chatard won also. Hamilton Heights was second place. And the large schools, Carmel, girls finished first, followed by Bloomington South. And then Bloomington North won the boys, followed by Franklin Central. But there's some really great performances. And the best thing about the meet on Saturday was I was there, and just so many people. There's so many people who go to that event all day long. And the kids are so excited to be there and to be on that world-class track, and but just to compete, and you just saw a lot of joy around that event on Saturday. It was really a lot of fun.
Oh, it's a great meet. Great meet. It's
really
a segue. It's you finish up with indoor. You're talking about indoor, right? And people have injuries during indoor, and the indoor season's kind of a rust buster, right? They're finding out what you can do time-wise after coming off cross country, and I think we field a lot of injuries. People don't think it's a 200-meter track. Some of them are banked,
right?
So you're doing more turns. Like in a 3,200, you're going to do 16 turns. Then we go to outdoor where you're 400-meter, a little wider. So, now we're getting into spring breaks are coming up, and we're going to segue into the outdoor season.
Yeah, and a lot of great competitions across the country this last weekend. I know Wabash College went down to Emory to the meet in the hills, I think they call it. And if you've ever walked across Atlanta, which I did during the Olympics, it's hilly. And so it's a great meet. It's called Thrills in the Hills. Wabash was down there, did a great job. Butler took some athletes to the Raleigh Relays.
Relays.
The Washington University Distance Festival over in St. Louis. I know University of Indianapolis was there. IU Indianapolis was there. So it's a great time of year. It's really, really a great to get out and watch these things. But let's talk about some questions that come our way and things that come up and a little bit of education that we want to give. And if we were to give athletes advice and say, you need a toolkit. You need a personal toolkit as a distance athlete, as a sprinter. We feel there's two things that ought to be in that toolkit. One of them,
foam roller,
and the other,
a mini band.
Right, stretch band. So let's talk about those.
Yeah.
So we agree on that. So I'm a huge fan of the foam roller. And there's different iterations. I saw a lot of kids at the meet indoors on Saturday carrying their own foam rollers around, the shorter ones with the knobs on them. And you've got to build your way up to that.
Oh, the knobby ones?
Yeah,
For sure.
absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. But what are some of the values of when we say, hey, if you put two things in your toolkit to have with you all the time, have at home and practices, events, so forth, foam roller, why do we make that recommendation?
Well, if you think about years ago, there were no foam rollers, right? We just would come in the training room, in the athletic training room afterwards, and we'd put our athletes in the whirlpool down in Bloomington we'd try to get it as cold as we can, and we'd bring it up to their waist, and 7 of them would all huddle in there, and then they'd step out of there and throw their legs up on the wall to let the blood drain down and refresh their legs. Well, now you have a foam roller, and the foam roller can do a couple of things. It works on tissue pliability. So we can do that. I'm a big fan of the foam roller on the piriformis, the glute area, the TFL in the front of the hip, and the IT band. A lot of people use it on the hamstrings, quads, and calves. I just think personally that puts a lot of pressure on there. So I think one more, if you're going to add another tool, you probably want to add a stick, or you can get those massage stick, or grab grandma's old rolling pin that she used to roll out dough with. So we've seen a number of those, but the foam roller and people ask when do you use the foam roller?
Yeah.
I really think
there's not a bad time, is there?
There's not a bad time.
Right.
It's personal preference.
Yeah. Now, if you have the resources and you have access, a trained massage therapist is really beneficial.
For sure.
And to be able to get to massage, we've done a lot of massage with track and field in hot hotels, in hot training rooms, places in Europe with no air conditioning, and we're just dripping. And but I want to say something about massage therapy that, and we're blessed here in the Indianapolis area with really good massage therapy, particularly in sports, and people who've studied it, who really are passionate about it. And but if you can't do that, you don't have somebody in your network, again, carrying that foam roller around and using it. Another thing I'll say about the foam roller that I like is there's an element that desensitizes the muscle tissue. Yeah. By rolling and putting your body pressure into that, whether it's along the rib cage, the low back, wherever it might be, shoulders, calves, so forth, that pressure that you get used to, it desensitizes the nervous system, desensitizes the tissue, and therefore you're not as stiff and sore, to put it in real layman's terms. But you mentioned the term pliability. I'm a big fan of stability, pliability, and flexibility. My 3 ilities. All right. Yeah. But pliability was one that came along really when foam rollers started coming around and so forth, of really starting to think about, I've got flexibility. I can stretch. I can touch my toes or whatever it might be. I can swing my hip holding onto a fence and doing lateral swings. But what's the tissue tension? The tension of the tissue, I think you can break that down to where it has a normal sort of status quo, that the tissue's more pliable. I think it's a great reduction mechanism to injury.
Yeah, the fascia, right? You're hitting the fascia. Like if you go to a massage therapist, does it with their hands, but if you don't have a massage therapist or an athletic trainer or a physical therapist that can do any of that, the foam roller is going to take the place of that.
Yeah.
There's some great stuff out there now on fascia training, which we may hit in another episode, but that's really what the foam roller does. Gets on top of the skin and underneath that fascia layer, right underneath the skin, to break up those adhesions, or what we call boulders in the water that may be keeping you from having a better performance or a great performance.
Yeah, and one of the things that so we've really discussed the foam roller. We talk about the stretch band or the loop band.
Mini band.
Yeah. I think immediately of muscle activation.
Yes. Yeah.
And muscular strength, but really it's around activation, which we talked then about what's the right sequence of muscle firing. So Scott, talk from your perspective about activation and what you see and what you like for your athletes to do around muscle activation.
Yeah, we have. It used to be you'd go out and run 10 minutes, right? Maybe stretch, do a static stretch, but everything is dynamic these days. And so with a mini band, there's a million different exercises out there. And beauty's in the eye of the beholder. You have to find out what you want as an athlete or a coach, what you want your athletes and what you want your athletes doing. So activating the glutes, turning on the hip flexors, activating the adductors, activating the glute medians, all that stuff around the hips, because the hips, everybody says it starts in the hips, and that's what drives you. So sequencing, if your glutes aren't firing, most people, 9 times out of 10, people come in and people turn on the wrong muscles. So if you can go through a mini activation with your glutes, with the mini band, just body weight stuff, starting from the floor up, you're going to take care of your body better and learn how to use the muscles in the right sequence.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways that you can use the bands, and I see athletes doing it. So the learning curve there's always athletes learning, sort of buying into the process, if you will. But I think if we keep messaging and understanding that those simple tools of foam roller and loop band can really be valuable assets to getting an athlete ready and also for the long haul. And again, low cost, you can do it on your own. And once you learn and feel it, you can just keep going with it and advance from a smooth foam roller to more density to some knobs and so on and so forth, and making it more intense on the body. So you talked a little bit about cold tank and cold immersion, and if you're in Boulder, Colorado, you just sort of lay in the creek and take it from there. And we know athletes who've trained there or who live there and have done that.
Yep.
But I'll go way back here. The first athlete that I ever was asked the question by this male athlete was 1982. The IUPUI Carroll track stadium had just opened. Matter of fact, the cement was still drying in the shot put ring and so forth, but it was the United States versus Russia. And the reason, and it was the USSR in 1982, the reason we had that meet is because we didn't have a Summer Olympics in 1980. And so at that meet, Edwin Moses, who won the gold medal in the 400-meter hurdles in '76 in Montreal, was here in Indianapolis and got done with training. And this was July 2nd, 3rd, so hot and so forth. And he asked me in the tent, "Hey, Ralph, where can I get a cold bath?" And I was like, "Why would you want to do that?" Right? Well, here's Edwin Moses, who went on to 196 straight wins in the 400 meters.
So many in a row, didn't he?
Yeah, it was over 9 years of winning. Revolutionized the event with his stride length and count between hurdles. And so Edwin was like, "I want to get in cold tank." So Jay Bradley, who was the athletic trainer at IUPUI, he got me into the facility there, and we filled up the old Whitehall stainless steel tub, and we were shoveling ice into this thing, and Edwin sits there up to his armpits in the cold tank, and I just was sort of shaking my head, and of course I was pretty young, right? 23 years old probably, and so Edwin, and then it was funny, then you move to now, and if we host a track meet, like a national championships or something, we're bringing in so many plastic cattle tubs to fill with ice water. it just lines the infield or the space where the team tents are. So over that period, it's just fun to reflect back and think, well, how did Edwin trip over that to say, hey, getting in ice water would be really good for me?
And now there's cold plunges, right? There's cold plunge. There's therapeutic
cold plunge businesses, right?
And everybody's cold plunging now.
Yeah.
And to think that was 40 some years ago, and Edwin Moses started to, he said, Ralph, get me a cold tub. This is what I need.
Yeah, I graduated Moorhead College down in Atlanta, and I've had the chance to be around Edwin several times since then, and I share that story with him, and he smiles, and I've asked the question, why'd you start doing that? And he never really gave me an answer. And but he ran for, I think, Athletics West.
Yes.
In those days, and so anyway, going way back in history, but. Somebody has to start these things, right?
Yeah.
And it's like Normatec boots, Gilad, whose mom invented the Normatec boots. She was a physical therapist and nurse out in the Boston area, and she was dealing with patients with lymphedema.
Yep. And nursing homes, right?
In nursing homes.
Yep.
And she started playing with compression and so forth. And it was her idea, and her son, Gilad, Gilad, he started driving around the country saying, hey, why don't you try these boots, these compression boots? And we had some of the beta the original boots, and they had big old things that would plug in, and this box of controllers and so forth. And it was a little bit like, this is a gimmick, but it's not.
And everybody has
then the research
boots.
comes out, and it's like the evidence followed, but they were ahead of the curve. And now there's compression boot wars, right, between competitors of different garments and so forth, and they're just fantastic as part of the toolkit of what athletes have access to today. So it's just fun to think, okay, where did this start? Why did it start? And so forth. So we turn to another component, and I want to talk not in depth. I say that, and we're going to run out of time maybe, but sweat test and sweat content. So this goes back to hydration. Another area that I impress to coaches and to parents and to the athletes, particularly at the high school level, is really what's the lifestyle that I can adapt to help me as an athlete. And I put all these things into lifestyle: sleep hygiene, nutrition, hydration, recovery, having a routine, a pre-event routine, a post-event routine, being disciplined, and not being a overly acute to the discipline standpoint, but just having a lifestyle commitment, and adds to your performance and adds to the enjoyment of the sport. And so you can do mindfulness things around mental health and so forth, and we'll have some experts from that space as we go forward, because it's such an important space, mental health, and how we manage our focus and perspective, and how we manage failure and success and distractions and all of those types of things. But we come back to hydration. Again, over time, coaches have been really good to say, bring a water bottle. Make sure you drink enough. Well, these are, what we know now is that those are excellent recommendations, but they're generic. So Scott has a different hydration fingerprint than Ralph does, than Tricia does. And so as different as our fingerprints are, so is our hydration need. And so let me explain that a little bit more, is that we have access to mechanisms to evaluate and measure an individual's sweat rate. So what's the rate at which I sweat? Okay. And we've all been around athletics. There are people who sweat just taking an English test, right? And then there are those who are 10 miles out on a run and they're just barely wiping their brow, right? So it's different. The rate in which we sweat is one factor into how should I drink, what should I drink, all right? The other part is the content. What's the content of my sweat? Am I really dumping out sodium? Am I dumping out phosphates? What are the electrolytes, the makeup? And so if we say, hey, I'm bringing a case of water to practice, well, that's a great gesture, but it's very inaccurate for the mass.
Yep.
Agreed?
Yes, yes.
And so to be able to, if you're a coach, if you're a parent, if you're an athlete, one place I believe to invest is into a sweat test.
Yes.
We did this, and we'll talk about some of the places to do this, but Sebastian Weldon, who's a race car driver, some may know tragically his dad passed away in an accident at Las Vegas. He was an athlete of ours at St. Vincent Sports Performance, and so now his boys are racing, and Sebastian, so we did a sweat analysis on Sebastian last year, and and he was 15 years old when we did that. We don't need to do another one because, again, once you have your calculation, it's good for a long time. And one of the companies so I'll sort of go at this the same way we did with foam rolling. You can have a foam roller, or you can have a massage therapist on speed dial and get into them on a regular schedule, right? Same thing with sweat testing. You can look at the evidence. You can download a sweat test. You can get on a bicycle and put a plastic sheet underneath and sweat, and it catches your sweat, right? And then you measure and do all this kind of stuff. And that's what was done for years. Well, now there are wearables. There's also, and I think it's the gold standard, is a company in England called Precision Hydration. So Precision Hydration, they've got a website, and you can go to Precision Hydration, and they have people all across the United States where you can find them and contact them and get a sweat test done. There are also people the same people and others, they may not be in the network, but they own the machine. So it's about a $8,000 investment, all right, to get the machine. And there are people that I know who will travel with that machine. We did it with Lindsay Langford and Anna Turner and some of our dietitians when we were at St. Vincent Sports Performance. We'd go out to the Motor Speedway. We'd take care of the drivers. We would test them. And it's basically putting a device like a wristwatch on the athlete, and it creates a sweating mechanism. And we draw that fluid out and then measure it and so on and so forth. And you come out with this nice table of information. And again, the standard is to have a dietitian evaluate the information, and then they create a menu. So that when you go to the grocery store, hey, Mom, I need Gatorade plus a liquid IV, or I need Gatorade plus a drip drop, or whatever the product might be. And so take the guessing out of it, because cramps, low performance, confusion, headaches, dehydration should all be eliminated because there's resources to eliminate it.
Yeah, and that brings a story. I was at Carmel High School as the athletic trainer, 30-some years ago, and we had a hot Saturday on the old Carmel course there, and an athlete from another school went down, and I encouraged his parents to take him to the hospital, and he was fine, but he was clearly dehydrated. Well, that same athlete came back a year ago, had the same thing happen to him, and this was 30 years ago. So we have great access to those products. Ralph mentioned Precision Hydration. You can do a passive sweat test. You can also do an active sweat test. And we're fortunate at VQ Labs, we can do those tests, and it spits out on a sheet of paper from Precision, are you a salty sweater? Are you a mild salty sweater? But it tells you what you need to take. And if we're speaking about track and field and cross country, maybe not necessarily on meet day, but those long run days you do in the hot summer, is, I think, what we're going towards. But get in the habit of doing that, because you need everybody. We drink a ton of water, right? Everybody, we're
Right.
hydrated to death these days, which is fine, but you need to get those electrolytes via liquid IV, Gatorade, LMNT, whatever your drink of
Right.
choice is.
Yep. Yep. As an athletic trainer, I always get nervous at distance events.
Yep.
I get the most nervous going to a midweek high school or college cross country event where all of a sudden it's mid-September in Indiana and it's hotter than it was all summer. And the kids have been in school all day.
Yep.
And all of a sudden they're coming out. Maybe you're traveling to cross country or you're hosting it. And I just worry about when was the last that they ate, had food, when was the last time they really had substantial fluids, the right fluids. And some of my worst situations around heat illness have been with cross country. And I say midweek, late afternoon, it's hot and kids are tired to begin with, and it's just a tough environment. So sort of reverse engineering that and saying, why did they get in trouble? Well, they didn't eat breakfast. They were running late. Well, I never eat breakfast because I just feel better. I'll just wait till lunch. And then lunch is like 11:15.
Yeah.
And then you've got class schedule and so forth. And the next thing you know, it's late. Same thing for people that working in an office all day and they just don't get outside during the hot weather. And so it's things, and we can spend some time on that on a podcast, is what are some real tricks of the trade, some real recipes to help prevent heat illness and really tragic situations. We got a question.
Oh, fire
First
away.
question. It's the first question from the first episode of Fingerprints on Metals. So, a good friend of mine, and I don't know if you've met her or not. She's now in the mental health business, but she says, I'd love to hear more about your experience with injured athletes from a mental standpoint. What have you both noticed with athletes struggling with the most during injury? Motivation to stick with rehab, self-identity, confidence, fear about their goals being pushed back. How do you manage those things? You think for a minute. I'm going to jump right on it.
Go ahead. Go. You got
I'll
it.
first say this, that I am a strong proponent of mental health support. And so this just dawned on me like 3 years ago when I was still at Butler University. And we started seeing more athletes, or became more talked about, that they just didn't have the confidence to get back into their sport. Musculoskeletally, they were on schedule. They were meeting all their plan of care thresholds, their landmarks, their timelines. Things were going really well from a musculoskeletal standpoint. But when the coach says, can they practice today? When are they going to be ready? When are you going to have them back on the team? From a musculoskeletal standpoint, A+. From a mental health standpoint, we didn't know. We just didn't know. And so we would push, we would prod, we would hope, and the athlete just didn't perform well. So now what we do, and this is what I say add to the toolkit, is we as body mechanics, right?
Yeah.
Physical therapists, athletic trainers, who are dealing with the injury and the plan of care, the return to play. How do we integrate mental health support? Mental health is not hey, this athlete needs to see somebody. And the person making that referral thinks, because I've talked to them, oh, well, let's get them with somebody and they can talk them through this. You've got to build trust. You got to sometimes break down to build back up. And so, Carson, what I'm saying with all of this is that I think there's a great open space in the musculoskeletal return to play world for mental health to ride alongside. And I know there's some tools out there, some different documents and so forth, assessments that can be used, can be integrated, that the athletic trainer, the physical therapist, the physician, the PA, whoever it might be, can push into that space. But that's one around the mental aspect of return to play and injuries, and it's now the other side of the coin. There are some athletes who they're like ducks, right? Yeah. Water rolls off their back, yeah. and it doesn't bother them. But do you have things you can add to that?
Yeah, I think that as an athletic trainer, physical therapist, those athletes you're working with, we always tell athletes that we'll get you to 90%, but that 10% is the mental, and that ends up being the hardest part to get through to the athlete. And so, our athletes tell us everything, right? They tell us more than they tell their mom and dads if you're talking about the high school athlete. And then with the added pressures to perform, they're always comparing themselves. Running's an individual sport, so they're comparing themselves to Sally and Susie and Johnny and Jimmy, and there's a huge need for mental part of that.
Yeah.
And so being an advocate for that, I'm a huge believer in that. Getting over the injury, an injury is an injury is an injury. You know how to treat it. We know how to get people back to the field, but, are they mentally ready to go out there? And if they fail, is that okay? Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
A lot of athletes today, especially running, and we're talking about running in cross country, they want a PR every meet. And I have countless examples of we run so much in high school. And they get to college and they run 4 times in the fall. They run 3 times in indoor. They run 4 times in outdoor. So they're running a whole year what we do in the fall, and people are chasing everything. So you have to be mentally tough, and sometimes you don't develop those skills till you're in college.
Yeah, and
it's different for everybody.
I really want to spend a session around or more around this mental health. And, there's a sort of a fork in the road from my perspective, and Adam Schunk and Chris Carr and others would debate, perhaps because I'm oversimplifying it, but there's mental health from a, am I healthy? And what is mental health? How would we define that, right? And when that gets off of the scale, so all of a sudden, like, hey, I woke up today and my neck's sore, right? So we put that on a scale of, man, I need some work on that. Well, we wake up some days and mentally we're not at the balance level, right? Or all these distractions throughout the day, relationships, parents, school, worrying about other things. There was a period of time in Brenda and I in our life where we were managing our elderly parents and plus managing our children, right? And so for the adult athlete, you're dealing with all of those things. And but the other avenue is truly around performance. I'm a disciple of Chris Carr, who's an extraordinary sports psychologist with the Green Bay Packers, and Chris would say you can't separate them, and I agree with him. But for this point, we talk about mindfulness, we talk about focus, we talk about grit, but then we talk about resilience and managing failure, and how do I take care of myself. And it's a fascinating subject. I've listened to Chris give team talks a lot, and he'll ask for a show of hands with a team, whether it's a football team or whether it's a track and field team, of saying, hey, what percentage of your performance is mental? Look at the Duke-UConn game last night, right?
Yeah.
What aspect of those last 5 seconds were mental, right? A high percentage, right? Decisions that have to be made, multiple decisions in multiple spaces and time going down. And so how do you manage all of that? It's a toolkit that we want to build over time. I appreciate the question, Carson, so that we could address that. But I talk about reverse engineering injuries. We've been in the business long enough to know that, I've seen that before, and so we know how to manage it. stick and ball sports. Yep, I've seen that thigh injury before. I've seen a hip pointer in football or lacrosse or hockey. So we're going to manage it, and it's somewhere in this sphere where we're going to manage it. Okay, and so, well, how do we know that? Well, we've experienced 1, and then 2, and then 3, and we've tried different techniques to manage it, and we get different results, and we keep track of that. But one of the best examples I give about running is I was at St. Vincent and I had a client that we saw through the old Bob Kennedy's first shoe store, along with Ashley Johnson. No, it was the running company here in Broad Ripple.
Running company, yeah.
And we saw an athlete that had some anterior knee pain, and so started going back through this, and they were running on the Monon Trail and they said, I was running fine. I said, well, do you hit anything? You bump anything? Were you on your knees, like playing with kids or whatever it might have been? He says, well, I did have to jump over a limb that fell onto the Monon Trail, right? So I thought, that's it. They changed their stride length. They changed the force. And now all of a sudden you're going from this linear motion where the whole body's sort of in the same motion, and it becomes this train on tracks. And all of a sudden it gets derailed a little bit. And in that moment, the body gets injured. So when I talk about reverse engineering, taking a great history, listening to the person, listening to yourself if you're self-diagnosing and sort of figuring out, why did this happen and how did I go about this? Or I didn't hydrate well enough. And sure enough, man, my time, I really sunk as I got going in my event. And so that's what we talk about. We'll talk about that more as we go through different episodes here. We'll talk about reverse engineering and why do we treat something the way that we do? It's because of the experiences we've had along the way. I talk about muscular strength as a pain mitigator. So there's ample evidence that shows that the stronger we are, it will decrease pain. Now, that's a deep subject, rabbit hole, right? But I'm just going to say this. If you've got an athlete that is avoiding the weight room because it hurts, you've got to find a way to get them through that barrier. Because strength, even if it's body weight, right?
Simple.
Step-ups, body weights, planks, push-ups, squats, single leg lunges, all those kinds of things. You've got to find a way to get them to do the activity, because if you always avoid it, and I just use anterior knee pain, patellar tendonitis, Osgood slaughter, all of those kinds of things that crop up in high school. My anterior hip hurts and so on and so forth. And I got pain in the back of my shoulder. Well, get stronger and you will see a decrease in all of those aches and pains. That is a whole subject we need to work on. We talked about, and we sort of talked about this pre-show, that we're going to talk about stability and balance, and we haven't even gotten to that yet. But man, when I see athletes get bumped in cross-country events, or I love collegiate events at 1,500 meters, and those athletes coming around the turns, being out at Boston University for those indoor meets in Boston, and the old pain train is running around the track, right? And you're down on the infield, and those athletes come by, and I mean, they're at American record pace and so forth, and it's a breeze that's unbelievable. When they're in that pain train, man, it is there's nothing like it, and that's why I love being behind the velvet rope and having access to those kinds of things, and know what athletes have to do to get through that process. But that's where they are jostling, they are elbowing, and particularly in cross country, if I see somebody get knocked off balance, I think, how do we make them stronger? Yeah. Right? Pillar strength. We think about all the various angles of the body and balance, and being able to do a single leg balance. and being able to do it barefooted and being able to bounce a ball off a wall and catch it. And now you're increasing your proprioceptive load so that you're advancing your balance. It's the same thing I do at age 67 when I'm starting to decrease my ability at balance. I do the stuff that I'm telling 18-year-olds to do to build balance. It's the same thing for me at my age range. So balance can be trained.
Yeah.
And strength can be trained without a weight room.
Without a weight room. You got to stress the bones, right? There's great evidence out there now that weightlifting is a great for increasing bone density. And we've known this all along, but it's ever more apparent today. And I think as a runner, you're on the edge of your stick. So you've got to stress the tibia. You've got to stress the femur. You have to stress the hip joint so that you can withstand those loads on an uneven cross-country course, or even more so, coming up, speak of track right now, we all turn left. So left-sided track syndrome, those of you out there, I'm a big fan of everybody runs left, well, cool down going right, because your left hip is leaning into the turn, your right hip is longer. And if I've seen 10, I've seen 20, along with my colleagues that we treat running injuries, everything happens on the left in running. Yeah. So we'll get into weightlifting, and you can do body weight stuff and still, you can do it in your own home.
Yep. Well, we're coming to the end of our hour, and this has gone a lot faster than I thought it was going to. And we talk about fingerprints on medals. I'll give you one last story, and then we'll wrap it up. But John Godina.
Yeah.
Going back to the 96 Olympic Games in Atlanta, I was there as part of the medical team and so on and so forth. And we're at Cheney Stadium, which was across the hill from Olympic Stadium. And John's in the shot put. He qualified actually for the discus and the shot put. First American to do that since 1924, to be in the Olympics in both events. He didn't make the finals in the discus, but ended up being second place in the shot put behind Randy Barnes in 1996. But the story was that he was like in a panic in the warm-up, and I was called over, and he had a cyst on the back of his wrist on his shot put hand. And it popped up. It pops up from time to time. He chose not to have surgery. Well, it pops up while he's warming up for the Olympic Games. And so I jump in we had these basically little 12-passenger vans, and we took him up over the hill, and we went to the inside the stadium, and I was riding along with him, and I just kept sort of rubbing that thing down. But I was also, going back to Carson's questions, I was also helping him mentally. At the same time, I was trying to stay calm, so I helped him. We've been great friends since. And John goes out, gets second place in the shot put. And when we talk about fingerprints on medals, those are the moments that you learn from those experiences. You cherish those moments. You're so proud of the courageousness of those athletes that overcome a barrier like that in that moment. And so as we wrap up, I just want to thank everybody who's been on board tonight. To the athletes, I love the fact that you participate wherever you are in your ages. Coaches, thank you so much for what you do for the sport. We just value you. We see it. We see what you do, and it's a lot. And so we thank you for all of that. Scott, it's been a pleasure here tonight.
Thank you, Ralph.
Any closing comments from this? Matter of fact, this guy's still seeing clients in Carmel, Indiana. If you can get into him, we'll talk more about that. But Scott's got a shop in downtown Carmel in the VQ Labs.
VQ Labs.
Yep.
Housed in there with Daryl Barnes and Jacob Crow, Tempo Sports Rehab, and Aspire Performance Rehab. We've got, like you said in the beginning, a cadre of athletic trainers here in town that have done the same thing that you and I have been able to do. And we like to take care of people, and that's what it's about.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody. We're going to close it out tonight. You've got our emails, or you got my email. Give me feedback. We need that to be able to go forward. So thank you.